This is my friend Jim in Edmonton, and he's been researching his own local area probably for quite a while. How long have you been working on this stuff, Jim?
Oh, on and off, probably since I've been in Edmonton, since about 95. Like a lot of us, though, probably about 2 years ago, I kind of woke up to a lot of the BS in the narrative. And from there, once you start pulling the thread, it just keeps going.
Right, exactly. There's no end.
Yeah. So the where I'm coming at this from is the apex of a ley line. My thoughts are it is in Lac Saint Ange at the Lac Saint Ange Shrine. And I'm gonna switch it to layers. Okay. So the Lac Saint Anne Shrine, you can see. I wonder if Google Earth would be better, but this is a start. So you can see that they've allowed scrubland to grow what used to be a river. And the story is back in the 1800s, the narrative is that this was some kind of a healing thing, and people would come here to be healed, and they would go in the water down here. And so originally you can see the river, the creek or whatever snaked along here. They drew it, I think, from a ley line. I think the ley line is there's a marker from 1859 that marks it. But I think they're drawing it in and they're using telluric currents or creating telluric currents to draw it and then heal this water. This whole lake is a couple kilometers long, maybe 5 kilometers wide, and it's only 27 feet deep at its max. So it's just a shallow pond. And they've copied it. You got to see what they did to it when we get into the pictures. It's unreal because they mocked it in a lot of ways. And wait till you see the shrine there. And the Pope comes here regularly. And the last time he was here was in 2022. So we're going to start that, and then we're going to go to another wacky one called Our Lady of the Highway. It's the dumbest name ever. So this Our Lady of the Highway is basically they bought a chunk of marble, the Elks Lodge out of a town called Vagerville, all pooled their pennies apparently, and bought a marble statue from Italy in 1960 and plunked it here. And you can tell they covered up a plug hole, and it had a squiggly river next to it and 150-year-old stairs that were rotted behind it, which I got pictures of. And go in here. So there you go. See your little your classic squiggly river like you see everywhere. And as water turns, it charges. So when you get into the hole to manipulate and restructure your water, this is what they did. And then you could pump a frequency into it, probably at I don't know, the midpoint or something. There's so much,
Mhm.
So this one here, you can kind of see it from the top view. And then finally, what I think of in between is the Sikh temple, which I had a friend give me a tour too. Okay, so here, kind of on the midpoint, in the I don't know if I can catch the
Mhm.
almost on the line in the middle is smacked the Sikh temple. And the story with the Sikh temple is that they started to build it maybe the 1970s, and they didn't borrow money, so they raised, they were against usury, and they just built as they raised money. So it's been a work in progress for about 50 years. And there was a scandal in the early 90s where they got caught hauling out enough dirt to go down 6 levels. So, and when I had a tour, they got no city water, nothing. They're either on a well or a spring, and there's some other mysterious things that they're doing, I think, to gear up for the 2040 MCO or whatever, when the comet cycle comes back. And also when this blocking of the ley line that I think the satanic agenda is doing, they're in place for post this, I think. So
Mhm.
all right, let's get into photos. Okay, so Lac Saint Anne Shrine. So this Paul Auger guy, he seems to be, I don't know if it's a real name, a real guy, or that's a numerology or something to mean something for them. But 1845 is when they seem to take this over.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that seemed to be a big year for them, big decade.
yeah, so in why it's kind of weird. Like, is this a grave marker for a bunch of people, and did they all die in 1890?
Mm.
I think this is some kind of symbolism they know. And I think they're marking marking a point, maybe. Maybe it was a plug hole here. I'm not sure.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so this marker they put up to mark something. I don't know who this guy is. Paul Auger's mentioned in a few places. In the whole 1840 to 1890. Like, I don't know if that's grave times or what.
That's interesting that it's a mass grave marker too,
Mhm. Yeah.
like something happened there.
Yeah, Lac Saint Anne Mission, they're calling it 1845. There is in the newspapers, they do remark that the Hudson's Bay Company were farming here in the 1700s. So this, it's BS, but they
What
were,
were
I
they
think they were
farming?
in this area. They were in this area before Edmonton. I think they knew where I think this is the apex of the ley line, and they came up and they
Mhm.
knew to
I'm
block it.
convinced they knew where all of that was.
Yeah.
Did you tell her?
They seemed to be following it.
So, and there around that this Lac Saint Anne, there's a ton of anomalies too. But so a couple pics. No idea who this guy is. There's a band shell with a rudimentary what do you call it? Amphitheater. Thank you. Yeah, they got this. They built a totally amphitheater out of like corrugated steel and wood, and it's cheap as hell, and it's gravel, but it's very satanic, and you got to see this. So I don't know who this person is. Like, somebody could look them up. There's these stations. They've copied the squiggly river with a concrete thing. This here, they've used old block,
Nice
but
picture, by the way. Great.
and I look behind it, and they've allowed trees and stuff to grow behind it. It's like boom, they've leveled whatever behind it was. I think there was a building behind that. I tried to get a picture of it. There's some
Yeah,
photos.
that definitely looks like a stairway going into something that was there before.
Yeah. But yet it's a stairway that looks like it's been rebuilt in the 1800s because it's terrible joints, right? But it's probably old block that was destroyed and they repurposed it. For why and to go to what? Hard to say. Eh? So here's behind, and there's maybe 75-year-old trees growing back there, and it's unless you had LiDAR radar, it's really hard to tell what's there. So this is their rudimentary amphitheater on the thing. And wait do you see the shrine? There you go. Oh my God. Oh, I do. I think the next one. This is ridiculously creepy. Like he's out swallowing or giving birth to the world, or what, eh?
Very interesting.
Big name out there too. I don't know who this dude is. Jesuit, I'm sure, probably very evil, but kind of worth looking into.
Yeah.
Marguerite de Hugo. Yeah, July 2022. It seems to come out here every few years. So
Same with the royal family too.
royal family too.
Harry and Meghan went out there.
Harry and Meghan. Yeah. So you think why Lac Saint Anne, eh? Of all the places, backcountry Alberta, Lac Saint Anne County. And the services, there's trailers there for a few workers, and it's like looks like an old Christian campground, but there's no money put into it. It's kind of a dump. Okay, so that's Lac Saint Anne. Okay, and now let's go to Our Lady of the Highway.
It's interesting that they've just kind of let it go so bad with the infrastructure there.
It's a very weird berm on the other side, so you turn away from the lake, and there's like this corner lot that's empty, and it's got this massive, long, narrow hill that obviously they had like dug up something and refilled it because it's just so random in this field.
Yeah.
And then there's gates and it says no trespassing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of underground stuff there too, and a weird, well-groomed road with a little turnaround, and then a big iron bar, and then looks like there's a gate. I don't know what's going on there. Kind of scared to roam around there and have somebody shoot me or something. There's a lot of people with guns in Alberta. So.
But they made like a handmade canal for all these rich cabins, so it's off the lake. So there's like a little thumbnail that's just a man-made canal, and then you go out into the lake.
Yeah. remind me to show you that on the map. So, okay, so that Our Lady of the Highway, it's near a town called Vegreville, right?
Yeah.
Vegreville. Vegreville right now has maybe 5,000 people. It's just a farming hub. So the narrative is that it used to be by this Our Lady of the Highway feature. And then in 1910 or something, they moved all the buildings on skids 4 miles north to this current location. So, and here's the buildings that they're claiming to have moved.
I'm not quite sure why they say things like that, but it's not the first time I've heard of buildings being moved. And it just doesn't make any sense.
So, yeah, so this is one of the buildings supposedly got moved 1913. And when you look at it, it's a brick foundation, which seems to be like it was mud flooded and whatever, but the same old BS, reworked a million times. There's some other old buildings still. There's the old train station sitting empty in Vegreville.
What's the significance of the period behind 1913?
I don't know. Are you seeing the train station right now?
Yeah, I'm seeing the train station.
Okay. The move first settled in 1894. In 1904, the Canadian Northern Railway arrives, passing 4.5 miles northeast. So moved buildings transported on wheels and skids to the new town. So this Our Lady of the Highway, another dumb, nothing to it. The statue is not even fancy.
Are the railroad tracks still there?
No, removed. There's remnants of stairs going down to the river. They look like about 150 years old. So here's the creek that was the squiggly creek that would have restructured the water that they were drawing from somehow. And there's just a shed. Yeah, there's remnants of these look like about 150-year-old spruce stairs. Yeah, very good pictures, but and then a couple blocked off areas. So I think for ceremonies or something. There's a pilgrimage apparently that goes from Lac Saint Anne to this place once a year, and it's a big hoopla in the Catholic community. I haven't been able to find any specific information on it yet, but I'll keep looking. Okay, so here's the inside of the Sikh temple. So it's a massive thing. This is 50 years in the building. So it's sprawling and huge, and there's a massive dome in the center. And this temple room, when you go in it, on the top, there's a false ceiling. So from there, and about 150 feet up, it's all blocked off. So what are they hiding in there? And you can see there's glass going around that's mirrored, and then in the gold dome. But why would you build this massive temple over 50 years and then block it off basically they could have this in a strip mall? That's only about a 15-foot ceiling. They obviously know what they're doing, to be digging down, to know how to build dome structure, but to hide it. And what a waste. The hardest architectural structure to make and the most beautiful showpiece of your building, and you're going to block it off with a popcorn false ceiling. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
My initial reaction is I suspect it's original architecture.
Well, no, this went up section at a time, because I've been in Alberta, in Edmonton, since 95, and I've seen this building get added onto, slowly growing, as is everybody else.
Maybe they're building onto something that was already there.
Could be, yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's true. Also, Masons would take a sole imprint of a building, and I think they had a way they could bring it into a timeline or repair a building by bringing it up from another timeline. And that seems to be a thing that they can slide into, which makes it difficult because everybody wants this one kind of smoking gun, and there seems to be about 5. You got timeline jumps, you got some spell casting going on, and I think they can loop in another building from a timeline. Why else would you need to take a sole imprint of a building when you build it? If it gets damaged, you just boom. And remember, how many times in the narrative do we see, oh, there's a big fire, oh, but we rebuilt it just like before? It's like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point, Jim. I mean, there's so many technologies that have been kept from humanity that
Yeah.
it would surprise me at this point.
So basically, and they always have to show us, and they showed us in Coral Castle. That little dude, whatever his name was, he rolled it all out in his Sweet 16 and all his the whole story. It reads like an alchemy textbook, you know. And you can say, I only work 9 to 4. Yeah, you were the janitor there, buddy. You were the janitor, and they came out and worked after you, not clocked off, is my opinion. So I wish I had some better photos of the that's the big dome, but you can't really see it very good, and I apologize. But fascinating. So I'm trying to go back again, and there's apparently one head guy that's a bit mysterious here, and I'm trying to see if he'll give us an audience. And the guy I want to bring is a architectural historian who's also a Freemason. And he toured me on the Masonic Lodge, which was built in the narrative says it was built in 1930. So that's the last few photos I got to share.
And you said that's midpoint between the two lakes.
Yeah. Let's go back to the yeah, you can see the map. So there you go. You got the shrine there, Our Lady of the Highway, and there's your Sikh temple. And I don't see any squiggly rivers around here. So like, I don't know where they're drawing their water from, unless it's a deep well. The other thing, they own about 5,000 acres of land scattered all over it as well. So they're kind of doing a Bill Gates, buying up the Midwest farmland because they know it's the safest place for the MCO, because we're about 1,000 feet above sea level. And we got the Rockies on the one side. So this is kind of the safe space to be. And it's such a satanic hotbed. It's like, you know,
right.
And
that in and of itself is an indicator that that's a powerful spot.
Yeah.
They like to do things on ley lines, power nodes, and things like that. And with the Pope visiting there personally, I would, he's the top.
Top dog. I know, eh? Like, how obvious. And you think does nobody say, like, why are you going to some backwater? It doesn't make any sense on the face value. Like, Lac St. Anne County, there's 500 people in that whole county. Okay, so the last one, yeah, this guy took me on a tour. This here is some sort of ancient crustacean in an old building in Edmonton, and I can't remember the building or the date, but you can see it's something antediluvian in there, and there's a bunch of them. There's geckos in this stuff. Edmonton appeared to have the same BS as Chicago. His official narrative is that the schools were connected, but I think they just copied the same playbook from Chicago and just did it 20, 30 years later.
That would make sense because they really weren't very original.
Yeah, exactly. And and I think when you bring in this building, you can change the top and change the doors, and they were the masters of facading, right? The great facaders. What's that? Conspiracy RS has a good video about the facaders. And the whole Freemason is an apt thing because they stole all the darn buildings. So the story on the lodge here is that this popped up, and I wish I had a big one. Maybe I have a big one, but anyways, AL 5930 Analingus time or 1930. There's no way this was made in 1930. Although they do try and fake it because there's a ton of in the building. They've got members going back to about 1885-ish. There's 6 groups in here. You had Knights of Scythias, which I'm assuming were the builders. The Oddfellows handled the orphan trains, the Elks, Freemasons, and the Scottish Rite. So this building was a dual building, and I never understood that there's actually there's 2 groups. You have the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and then the other group that I don't know what they're called, Masons.
I think it's York Rite.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So the whole building was constructed with there being 2 groups, and even the original flooring, which I think I got a picture of, it has both their crests and everything, and they kind of had their own space, each of them. Well, apparently last year, the Scottish Rite up and buggered off after 90 years and rented a warehouse behind Leon's, the furniture store. It's about a mile from my house. And why the heck that would happen after 90 years and they'd rent a warehouse? to me is there's a schism going on right now. So we'll see what happens with that. Here's the temple room. The brass inlays over the whole building was absolutely gorgeous. Temple room. Now, the guy that taught me how to make organite, who's a Cree medicine man, he says that the two ceremonial rooms, and then there's another one at Great Western Bank, about a half kilometer down the road, says are the three areas where they do the satanic sacrifices. That's what he said. So I have no guarantee that. He's a bit weird, but you know.
How did the energy feel in there to you?
It was good. It was good. I think the bad people left. Wait, what do I know? Okay. Yeah, like who's who. His story too is that literally everybody in the town we're all a member of these societies. And you can see the same names. People in Edmonton, it's all still the same families that run everything. 1950.
My understanding is that it's only the upper level degrees that really know anything about what's going on. The lower degrees aren't privy to the secret stuff.
Yeah, totally. Is that all I have? Oh no. What the heck? All right, gotta do this again. Man, this is frustrating.
No worries.
It's like it'll only queue up with so many photos at once.
Ever since I realized things weren't what we were told, I mean, to me, the most exciting thing of all is just to go out exploring and looking for stuff like this.
Yeah,
It's like my
like
favorite activity.
like Paul Cook says, boots on the ground. Take your cell phone and drive 50 miles from where you are, and you'll see some crazy stuff. So I don't the whole building, like they put it up in 1930, but there was a whack of lodges, and I don't know if they all met here or it's a bit of a mysterious thing. And they love to celebrate themselves and pat themselves on the back. So they've got names in their heroic achievements going back to like 1892 and that I saw. But when I was looking into the newspapers, they were here as early as 1882.
I know they like to use the title worshipful.
Oh, there we go. I just had the cursor right or left. Duh. Okay. Yeah. All right. So the one ceremony room is, I'm guessing it's Irish oak, and the other one is either a black walnut or a dark mahogany, which are both Eastern woods. So the lore goes, but it's BS. This wood used to grow out here, and there's an ancient cypress tree right by here that they chopped down, and it's like 5 feet diameter. I got my foot next to it as a picture with because you can tell the cypress because the inner is hollow, and it should not grow up here. And then there's also a 150-year-old horse chestnut tree still in beautiful shape in an alley, and it like that tree should not grow in this climate. So either the climate changed or the energies of the ley lines are helping that stuff grow and stuff. So the woodworking and the symbology is always amazing. Although I gotta say, this kind of reminded me of an old school, like with a lot of like a blonde oak. It's it's kind of like seen it, done it. The mahogany one, though, wow, that was drop dead gorgeous, and that was a smaller and had a bit of a darker presence to that room. There you go. So totally different wood, you see. He wouldn't tell me what these meant. He just giggled at me when I asked him.
I have to kill you if I tell you.
Yeah. Okay, terrible photo, but maybe I got a better one. But so he also says, "Oh yeah, there is a heat exchange air conditioning system in it that nobody knew how to operate, but I figured it out and I told them a few years ago, blah 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 blah." And it's kind of like the whole fireplace thing where you open up a flue and somehow there's a pressurized difference and it's sucked in air from up high. So, which I think that's actually how the old fireplaces work. They did something to have a pressure differential so it sucked in air down, or they could reverse it and make it go up. So he got it working for them. And maybe I don't have a very good photo, but it's like, in other words, that building came into being and it had this thing there that everybody scratched their head as to what the heck they're going to do with it. So,
I'd love to understand more about the fireplaces and
yeah.
how those worked originally.
Yeah, like I don't know the whole radium thing. I don't know. To me, I think it was an air induction, but as until more information comes available.
I'm just wondering if when the cataclysm occurred, if that's what changed the climate, because I just really wonder about that.
My theory is the Great Madrid event of 1812 is when it did it, or 1811 or something like that. And that's the same time as the whole Canada-US war. So I think that was a big smokescreen to whether that was a man-made cataclysm or a natural one. I'm not sure. Because you look at like what could have happened during this time, and this makes sense because about 1812, oh, they said they rolled in 1845 and dusted things off, and those old maps, this area from like Montana and Colorado all the way up to Alberta, it was either called Land of Giants or unknown. And I don't know. In the southern part of the province has the big dinosaur BS too out of Drumheller. That's a big scam that's been around since 1900.
Right.
They're making a lot of money on tourist dollars down there. And and they basically find giant horses and mastodons and hey, this is a triceratops. Oh my gosh. So, oh yeah, okay. So yeah, so I think this is York Right. Or wait a minute. Yeah, one of them's York. That's the Scottish Rite, and that's the York Rite, I think, as he explained it to me. So the York Rite buggered off after 90 years, which is like, wow, jaw-dropping. Their main lodge, the whole lodge was half built for them. And they leave and set up shop in a warehouse. Man, I'd like to know more about that. Breaking sod, so they say. So how this building came to being, just to touch on that, is there's a couple things. Remember when I talked about West Edmonton Mall, how it did some spell casting to simulate it being finished for opening day? Maybe I'll retell that story for it was a separate video. So I have a friend that worked for the 555 Corporation, which built West Edmonton Mall, which between that and Minnesota were these big giant malls and blah, blah, blah. So they built it in the West End, which is always reputed to have a ton of tunnels going everywhere. And even on Reddit, there's subthreads where the kids talked about that if you grew up in the 70s, you'd prowl around these tunnels and sleep in them and whatever. So they built on something that got destroyed. And when West Edmonton Mall opened up, he was a maintenance guy, and they said, go to the other end of the mall and get a bunch of wine and beer or whatever for the after party. And it was like a half an hour walk. And he said, like, all the mirrored tiles and it was a mess. There's garbage everywhere. He's like, how are you going to open this place in an hour? Like, what the heck? So he trudged back after he got his load of booze, and he comes back and it's all done. So it appears they're doing spell casting to simulate it. And I think they could probably spell cast it to use you to think a building isn't there. Because if the Royal Alec Hospital, there's a photo op of the mayor and the premier in like August 1910, standing out in front of an open field, breaking sod, giving the high fives and all that. And this is about maybe a 4-acre property, and it's empty. And then April of 2011. So August 2010 to April 2011. And you cannot dig foundations in this area. We get a frost, we get 5 months of solid frost. So you're not digging a foundation. But yet in April, boom, there's a full hospital completed. But yet there's 3 different pictures of it. There's a full one, there's a half of one, there's a half of one with a massive 150-foot smokestack. So you're like, well, what the heck? Like, why would you build those in pieces? And I don't have a definitive answer, but my working theory is that this is where the timeline insertions come into it, where that's what really screws us up, because nothing makes sense, because there's sub and timelines and our memories are disjointed from these different timelines. The one example I have, because there's 3 newspapers in Edmonton out of 1882. Why did they need 3 newspapers is beyond me. But one of them, they built the first big post office in 1910, and there's a picture of it with a Zeppelin on top, and it's, you don't know if it's photoshopped or what. It's a weird one. You look in the 3 papers. One of them says Edmontonians woke up to a shiny new post office the next morning. That's the Edmonton Journal, which is behind a paywall to see that. The other one, Edmonton Bulletin, and the other one of them mentions that, oh, it was built a year ago, but then it said at midnight they outfitted it and opened it the next day, which still made no sense. And then the third one doesn't mention it at all, and just references a lot of little smaller post offices, like postal outlets. Because at that time there would have been maybe 10,000 people in Greater Edmonton. So why do you need a giant post office for that? So my thoughts are maybe they're picking different timelines and pulling in pieces from them or something. I don't know. And that's it. I think that's all the photos. So that was my summer in Edmonton, Michelle. Touring around.
Awesome.
And we found a megalith structure. There's a megalithic structure about 100 miles east of us, and we found it by fluke. And I cannot find it again. I cannot see it on the map. We tried to retrace our steps. It's one of those things. It's like, is it not meant to be refound? What the heck? Did I dream it? Was it the Mandela effect and it doesn't exist anymore? And it's frustrating.
You're raising some interesting questions, and what popped into my mind just now while you were talking is that maybe since Edmonton was such a powerful spot on that star tetrahedron, that there's some anomalies there just by virtue of its placement. And I suspect, my feeling is whatever happened through the grids, and they were just knocked off from what, they were originally very precise. I wouldn't have any problem believing that there's a dimensional aspect to them as well, like you're talking about with inserting buildings and things like that.
Yeah, like I can't quite. That's a tough one, I think. And I think that's kind of their ace in the hole to kind of stop us from looking into stuff, because it doesn't make sense. Some stuff, it's like, oh, you did repair that building, you did actually build it, or and I think they pulled out, they had different tricks in their play bag. And I think it's just like our egos, our shadow ego is equally as smart as our light ego. And I think that's what we got to think. Like, if I was a psychopath, what would I do? I would run 3 newspapers. I would give conflicting stories so that I would have you spinning. And it's basically the old turd in the punch bowl trick. And it's only we've persevered. And we're like, no, wait a minute. It still doesn't make sense. And we just keep going.
And it sounds like they were still trying to get their stories together too. And the groups that you've been talking about, the Masons and the Knights of Pythias and the Oddfellows and the Elks, and those groups would have been behind getting the reset narrative, making things serviceable and livable, paving over the roads that were mud flooded.
Totally.
Things like that. So they were the bringers in of the narrative, if you will.
Yeah, and if you look for a smoking gun for a building or anything tangible, it's a little bit elusive. And where I think the it's a time sucker is the old publications, like Archivist is really onto it. But man, that guy must be a speed reader, because there's three newspapers in Edmonton. They publish like 3 times a week since 1882, and it would take thousands of hours to read all that stuff. And the keyword search is not reliable. And you learn so much else if you actually, and I've read certain periods and spent like all day, and I read 2 weeks, and that's just one paper. And I'm like, it's like, holy crap. But that's where I think that's where their story, I think, will fall apart.
Right, absolutely. And one of the things I've noticed, and I don't know if you found this when you read through the articles, is that they just, drown you with details.
Yeah.
They're like, this guy and 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 this happened and this happened and this happened. And it's like, what did I just read? Almost like they want you to convince you that it really happened by the amount of detail that they put in.
Yeah. And you can see some filler too. Like there's this one hilarious one where it's like, oh, it's somebody lost a coat. If you show up in the newspaper office and you pay the cost of this ad, you can get it back. And they ran that same ad for a year and a half. It's like, oh, what, you're just filling space. But I mean, I just read the Edmonton Bulletin. There's also the Edmonton Capital and the Edmonton Journal that all predate 1882. And in 1895, Edmonton population was 1,195 people. Why do you need 6 service groups and 3 newspapers? It makes no sense. For 1,195 people that were eking off the land. Oh, and the other thing is that, all the natives were, shifted around, and they didn't know how to farm. They didn't know how to do nothing. They were starving. And so the Alberta, you could tell that the 1882 newspapers, they literally had to set up ongoing constant soup kitchens. And they were digging whitefish out of Pigeon Lake, which is south of Edmonton. And then they got lazy and stopped skinning them, and they would just cook them whole in the broth for the guys. It was cruel. And then the Indians would screw the Hudson's Bay guys, because the game is that they'd say, okay, we'll give you a gun and some food and enough to go on a hunt, and we get half. That was the game. So the Indians would show up at a depot or whatever and get their supplies, and then either bugger off back home, or they would go to another depot and get more supplies. And then, communication was slow back then, and they wouldn't catch on for about 2 weeks. So it was crazy. It was madness. And 3 newspapers for 1,100 people, really.
Yeah.
And less than that in 1882. I don't know, maybe 400 people then.
It sounds like they were setting up shop.
Yeah.
And I suspect even with that, doing the digging around Coney Island and so forth, I just feel like whatever happened wasn't very nice. Whatever things were like during that time, they're going to paint themselves in the best possible light. But like with the grave markers you find with a list of names and things like that, it wouldn't have been very nice what was going on there.
That's right. And we still don't know who they took out. Like the Cree that are all around here, all these little First Nations, 1 million of them, like why they need, there's like 150 in Alberta of these small First Nations, an actual nation. Like, what the hell? That makes no sense. And down south, you got the Blood Tribe, which have a totally different language structure and stuff. And then they shifted the Dene. I think the Dene were down here. And the Dene have a link to New York, which when I bring out a little bit more information, I'll tell it to you. It's fascinating.
I mean, I like I said in my last video, I really think that the Masons stole the identity of the original builders and just kicked them back to the Stone Age. And if you have been marginalized and brutalized beyond imagination, you're not necessarily going to remember what your past was, because they're all were part of the brainwashing too. So there might be some elders that know the true story, but my belief is you don't have to look any further than the indigenous people all over the world to find out who the original builders were.
Yeah, and I think different, like how the Mohawk, for example, are known as, they always like them to do the high-rise building construction because they're great builders and they're fearless of height. So I think these old groups had very specific functions in the old society. Now, my theory about the Dene goes because they're the Dene who are up north are known as the like the end of the earth people, but they're not the end of the earth. You got the Inuit above them, and they were down here. There's one neighborhood right just across from my house, basically, that it was called the Bronx in the 1913 map of Edmonton. Now it's like, oh, where'd you get the name of the Bronx from? Bronx in New York was a nickname from a guy named like Jonas Bronx in 1650. It was probably a made up name or whatever. But that land was originally like the Rapa Nui or some similar name to that, the Rapa Nui Indians, and they were known as the end of the earth peoples. And the Bronx was always a special place. There was some mystery about it, and they let it die. Like they you could tell the ones that they kind of like they let them just dilapidate, that they knew it was used to be something special, and they wouldn't go in and bulldoze it, but they would just kind of leave it. And there was always some massive crap in the Bronx and some amazing architecture. You got Bannerman Castle fairly close to that too, I think. But so this area in Edmonton, why would you call a neighborhood near the Bronx? And there was in the 1913 map shows a passenger rail hub with like 6 short commuter lines stopping right there. So you kind of put 2 and 2 together, and you wonder that if that wasn't the Dene people were the ones responsible for transportation. Now, whether that was just around our plane or interplanetary or interdimensional, I don't know. But I think that's the thing. And in other areas, so the different Indian, yeah, and you shift them around and you just disenfranchise them from their heritage, and they don't know what the hell.
Right, that's exactly what's going on now. With immigration. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to flood the West with people that have no connection to it.
Oh yeah. Oh, we see it. We got the Ukrainian evacuees, and they sent the Somalis out, and it's waves of people to integrate them.
That's been part of their playbook for a while.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting that you mention a Rapa Nui in New York, because that's the name of Easter Island.
I might be wrong on that. It's similar. Rananakwa or something. Rananakwa, I think. And it's one of the translations is the end of the earth peoples. And to me, end of the earth is like, oh, you went into there, whatever, and you flew somewhere in a Zeppelin or whatever. So for uneducated, simple people, post-cataclysm, they were the end of the earth people, because when you went there, you disappeared. Or it was a mass extermination camp, and that at the end of the earth, which, unlikely, but who knows? But there's something there, and until more information comes available, there's some educated guesses I think that can be made. And I have this book that was written by the Dene, got shifted way up to like Campbell Island in the territories, where it never even had air access till the 60s or 70s. So these are very unwesternized or whatever people. And this lady went up there. She was in this book group that I'm part of, and she was up there as a kid, and she's like 60 now. But this guy she knew, he's wrote some books on Dene mythology or whatever, and it's like, so I want to get a hold of her and say, I'd like to talk to that guy, because I think their old mythology might retain some of the legends about what they were doing before.
Yeah, I think a lot of things in myths.
And I think they wrote it because when you go through a post-cataclysm and nobody knows anything, that's when you look at the game of baseball to tell you about geometry, or you look at these old legends. And I think that's they know it, that unless you etch it on a big building, and that's no guarantee. Otherwise, you keep it in the consciousness of your people, and then you can piece it back together. I think that's the strategy for thousands of years.
No, it's interesting with the Hopi. I don't remember where I read it. And when I was first starting to wake up, long before I started to wake up to what I talk about, but when I first started just to wake up, I remember hearing or reading somewhere that the Hopi said that we were living on top of the previous world. Like, whatever world it was, a third world.
And didn't the ant people save them in the last
so they were in a place in like around the Grand Canyon. The little Sipapu comes to mind, and that they came back up to the surface of the earth. So it sounds like they were living underground for a period of time.
If you had massive volcanoes going off, you're going to have a cloudy sky and nothing's going to grow for 3 to 4 years. So there would be a need to go underground for a significant period of time.
Yeah, they would have had to.
Yeah.
They would have. Everybody would have been under. Every survivor would have had to have been underground
Yeah.
when this happened. And I'm convinced
Yeah.
it was man-made, because I don't think there would have been any survivors if they wouldn't have been shovel ready to start digging everything out with the
Yeah.
plan to take over
Yeah.
everything. If it was just a random.
Yep, totally. And I think with bioluminescent plants and God knows what else, I'm sure there's a way to probably get enough of your vitamins and whatever in like an alternative view of sunlight. Heck, you even got that cult in Florida that thinks the earth, the earth's hollow, and there's could be a sun down there too, or because everything's inverted. So who knows, right? The other theory I like is, have you seen Douglas Diehold Foundation? He's been around back in about 06, I think. He did out a whole series of how people survive these cataclysms, and he got all his formulas from the Bible. And his theory was the whole where they went away for 40 years, but when they came back, and this is I don't know, Old Testament, I think. They went for 40 years, and when they came back, they said the soles of their shoes weren't even worn, and it was as if they'd only been gone for 30 days. So it's like they looped into a different timeline and then just bided their time and came back for what then was 30 days, but they missed the 40 years when now the sun's back and things are growing again. And so, and you wonder if that kind of technology like that's, as we get closer to 2040, are they gonna release that to some people? I don't know. Or maybe we'll all wake up and get our connection, and our pineal gland will become decalcified, and we'll all figure it out.
I'm open to that possibility that you just
Unless they get us first with the toxins,
They're not going to. They're not going to get it.
They'll get it. They'll put it in your shreddies or in your Coca-Cola.
They're trying like heck, but
Yeah,
I don't think they're
they
going
can't.
to lose.
No,
the
game's done. Yeah.
I wanted to share this alignment that I found. I was crossing over Siberia, and then it came into North America at Cape Bathurst in Northwest Territories. And then I followed it down through Puglucktuk, Great Bear Lake, Wrigley, Northwest Territory, and Great Slave Lake, Hay River, Fort Nelson.
Hay River just got evacuated.
Lesser Slave Lake, Alberta, Edmonton, Banff, Lake Louise was on this alignment. Jasper, Takakan Falls in Alberta. And then it goes on into Columbia River, Spokane, Washington, Idaho, Oregon state line, Elko, Nevada, Carson City, Sierra Nevadas, Death Valley, Pasadena, Los Angeles, on its way into Mexico. So it goes, that particular alignment.
Interesting.
It started in Mexico, in Merida, Mexico.
Is it a straight alignment, or does it sometimes follow a snaky curve?
It's this one, it wasn't straight. It was more like a circle. But I followed it a long distance. I went through China, Australia, New Zealand. So I started in Merida, went through Guatemala, El Salvador, the Galapagos Islands, Easter Island.
Mm-hmm.
But it did come back around and go through that part of Canada.
Fascinating.
So I should probably do some research on that one. I'll put that on my long list.
I know. That's I'd like to check out and just read for 3 months to get some facts, but it's
because even worse than the United States, that whole history of Canada has been totally obscured because so much of it's inaccessible, or long winters and things like that. So people think there's nothing there, but if that would be an amazing exploratory trip.
Yeah. Well, there we were at a last car show of the year last year, and I got lost, and I drive up this road and I see a Catholic church from about 1900 with a massive stone half circle, 2 feet thick, 200 feet wide, perfect half circle. The classic mud flooded, where the back half was about 8 feet high and the front half was about 2 feet high. And I'm like, whoa, stop the phone, take the thing. And then I lost that phone. To this day, that phone has never showed up again. And I can't find it on Google Earth. And I've traced my steps, and it's like, it's so frustrating. So there was stuff here. They've how long ago? But I think the Madrid event, I think, took it out. And my working theory is that the Indian groups that worked for the old Moorish groups, I think their masters were the six toes and six fingered, the remnants of the giants. That's what I take, and you see it in the bones that they find, right? And I think the last of them got taken out early 1800s.
It's definitely a mystery, but clearly they've lied to us big time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like the stories are just ridiculous.
Have you seen the in the three national parks in Alberta? Have you seen the buildings? Have a look at Waterton and Banff. Like, Waterton is jaw-dropping gorgeous. It looks like Versailles Palace. It's huge, and it looks 500 years old. The Banff Springs Hotel is a big old massive hotel, probably 100,000 square feet. Classic old Tartarian building. And then the psycho Floyd Wright and his cronies came in and built this brutalist structure about half a kilometer up the mountain and called it the Rimrock. And it's this square, faded green building and total brutalist architecture, just to be up higher to say, screw you, we built higher than you. And it's ridiculous. And it's basically a Lego box up on the mountain. And then you have this massive old Banff Springs Hotel, which is, yeah, check it out. And the Waterton one is amazing. And there's a lot of iron down in, there's like Red Rock Canyon and stuff. And like, to me, if there's a lot of iron oxide down there, then I think that's a lot of buildings got melted and there's iron in those things. And that's they leach out.
Yeah, they got melted, they sank, they became swamps, they got turned into deserts.
Yeah, and I don't think this Alberta got like 500 feet of mud flood or lava or anything. I think I think because in Drumheller, the whole dinosaur thing, they're finding these stuff and they don't have to dig more than 20 feet. So, that's what my running theory on that.
I think it was a worldwide event, but I think some areas got hit harder than others. Now, where I live in Arizona, I can see Sedona is a nodal point of the grid, and so I can see where there's just like land dunes. It's the only word I can use that seems to fit, where it's like all over. I mean, it's just like it's ridiculous. Like, it's hard to even find words for it, but it's like it rippled out, and then the Masons just came in and made it livable. It's really interesting. So
yeah,
I do think
probably was in the desert 250 years ago. It probably wasn't a desert.
I don't think it was. It's interesting because I'll get on my Facebook feed, I've got some kind of like 1930s Arizona highways pictures that are coming up. And now I'm looking at it, I'm like, it's crazy what's showing up. It's like it was just, I mean, imagine the worst desert you've ever seen, and it's like 10 times that. And in the 1930s, they're putting in the roads or whatever. It's like you run out of gas and you're dead from the appearance of it.
Or you get a dust storm come in and stay there for 2 days and you're done.
So there's definitely, I'd love to know the story. I'd love to have a time machine and just go back for a day and see what it was like here.
Yeah, well, all truths revealed in these transitionary times. So it is so exciting, and it comes in fits and spurts, as stuff gets revealed and you're like, oh my gosh, I never even saw it that way. Wow. Like, it really is an amazing time to be alive.
It is. I agree with you. And I appreciate all the time and effort you're putting into
And
looking
you
around
two
your local
have more
area.
time than me. I got my cars and dogs and my hobbies and stuff, and you know, and I mean, you're fulfilling your mission, and I am too in my way. So we just keep doing what we're doing, and as I
Exactly.
get new information, I will always share. And
It takes all of us because there's just way
Yes.
too much. And
Yeah.
even when I do research start doing research, I can just skim the surface of what is actually there to
Yeah.
find and make it digestible. But there's so much more.
I just want, I want to help people and figure shit out like everybody else, right? And I've got pieces of the puzzle, you got pieces of the puzzle. And this is the way, this is how God did it to bring us all together. And then, oh my God, then the pizza shows up. And it's like, wow.
I've heard that the cabal invented the internet to control us, but without the internet, we would be
Oh my
serious
God.
trouble.
Unless you could get collective consciousness where we could start sharing information via telepathy, you're right. Like you're at the mercy of your own public library. It's crazy how insulated or what do you call it? Like myopic we were back then in our little bubble.
And it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I graduated from high school in 1981. I spent 4 years. Well, I went to college for a year, and then I spent 4 years in the Army, and then I got out of the Army and went to college. Graduated with a degree in social work in '89, and I guess it was in the '90s.
I think we're about the same age. I was born in 68.
Yeah, I just turned 60.
Okay, so you're born in 62.
I was born in '63.
63.
So it was the internet started coming in about the '90s, PCs
Yeah.
and the internet. So yeah, that's our saving.
Yeah, Windows 95. Before that, it was just for the rich and the nerds. It didn't really get mainstream till Windows 95 started.
Right, exactly. And they totally controlled the narrative before that. We could still go out and think critically and ask questions, but there's no way I'd be able to have access to the information that I have when I
And a lot of these secret society groups probably shared books throughout the world, and there was they were the old network, the old Al Gore version, internet. Because otherwise, how would you know? You would have. How would we even know about Buddhism and Hinduism and Jainism and all that stuff? Like, I don't know. It all got boiled down to whatever some bastard put in an encyclopedia, which was, totally controlled.
Right. Everything was.
Everything. And we didn't even know that it was controlled. That's the kicker.
Right, exactly. I mean, they almost got away with that.
I mean, there's always going to be the awakening, and it's always going to be both ugly and crazy and whatever adjective one wants. But I think we're getting close.
There's other things going on behind the scenes I've been following for years, and there's things that are starting to happen in the States that are telling me that we're going to see a big change here pretty soon.
Even sleepy old Canada, where we all just want to go about our business and drink our Tim Hortons coffee, we got to face the bullshit too. So it's coming with us too. And like everything keys upon the States. That States is the pivot. It's everybody's sort of queuing their page from that. I think Myanmar is a step ahead. They threw off their cabal,
right?
And of course, you don't hear about them in the media, right?
So I think we're heading in the same direction, and it's just taken longer than I expected. But
and the thing is, and people and groups and societies got to get their affairs in order for, in my opinion, the plasma or pole shift or comet return, whatever, however one wants to describe it.
Right.
My working theory is we have till about May 2040, because I know several researchers that have come to similar dates. So, and after that, but it's not going to take out everything. And it seems like the Midwest area, from like basically me to you, I think we're going to be fine. Whole East Coast, any tidal wave is going to take out that one side. And California is on the fault line and all that anyways, and any kind of disruption in an ocean is gonna, the coastal area. So we really are in a sweet spot right here. You're about what, 1,500 feet above sea level?
5,000. Where I live is 56.
5,000? 56.
Yeah.
Ah, even better. Yeah, we're in a plane, but we're in 1,000. But we also got 2,000 kilometers. So as far as where it's gonna hit, I mean that Douglas Diebold, you should look into him. Been around for 20 years. Christian researcher. You never heard of him?
No.
No? Wow. Yeah. Okay. He's kind of known. Archaics refers to him once in a while. That guy Jason, but I think he's pegging it Atlantic Ocean. So you're gonna get the big tsunami coming that way.
I was really afraid, like with Nibiru, and I thought I knew what was going to happen, and I've kind of given up trying to figure that part out.
Yeah.
I enjoy uncovering what's been hidden, but I'm just not in a predicting mode on that, because I don't think it's that easy to predict. The only thing I am comfortable predicting is they're not going to get away with what they've done.
I totally agree. And they say, only God knows the date when things are going to go down, and that's the way it's got to be.
Right.
But man,
I'm hoping sooner rather than later, as far as that.
I know I'm tired of the waiting. It's like a Band-Aid. You just want to rip it off. Like, come on, enough. I don't want to see an ugly bank bail in and scoop up all our assets. And come on, don't make us go through that, please. Right? Like,
yeah.
If
what I understand is going to be happening, there's going to be a complete change in the financial system. I do believe there's the Fed system, and I think that's on its way out. The dollar's on its way out. The system that we've been living under, I do believe there's a gold-backed currency that's coming in.
Yeah.
And I believe there's going to be a whole new way of doing things.
There has to be. We can't, or we're going to get into Weimar Germany, where you're going to go buy a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow full of bills.
Right. So I mean, Weimar, it's interesting, when I did some research on that period of time, all that we're seeing playing out now, especially with the transgender stuff, started in Weimar Germany.
Totally.
That was like their practice bed.
Yeah.
Was Weimar Germany.
You're right. They were having gay porn live theaters back in the 20s. Yeah. I wonder if that was the test run for all this crap.
I think it was.
I
think all that we saw in that history, the concentration camps, all the stuff they were planning for later, they were testing. I mean, this has been planned out. Whoever's behind this really hates humanity.
We're cattle. We're cattle to them. That's all we are. They don't.
Organic creation, and they're like hell-bent to take us out, except what they can control.
Before we're done, I wanted to ask you about, I noticed when I was reading those newspapers, I was in 1902, and there's 7 theaters in Edmonton, and it's Orpheum, the Roxy, the Paramount, the Jasper, the same names you see everywhere. And I'm thinking, when you got 5,000 people, why do you need 7 theaters? And I'm thinking I think they pumped a lot of propaganda. And you know how all those old films, they said 90% are just gone. I think that's how somehow subliminally maybe that's how they did some of their spell casting.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Orpheus was a musician that was able to put people to sleep.
Wow.
Orpheus put people
I didn't know that. Wow, that totally makes sense then. Orpheum Theater. My God. They're telling us in our face. Right there.
There was disclosure in those early films. The Westerns were pumped out like Model T Fords. It was an assembly line process, and they were filling people's heads. And they still believe it to this day. That generations believe that to be true history.
Yeah. Tame the Wild West. And, oh my gosh. It's unreal.
Yeah.
I
I'd probably let you go.
Yeah.
but appreciate your time, Jim, and all your work.
Absolutely. And you too. Goes both ways. And thank you for doing what you do.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim.
You betcha. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.